In February 2024, Vladimir Putin sat down with former Fox News host Tucker Carlson for an interview. Carlson's first question was about NATO. Putin's first answer began in the year 862 with the arrival of a Scandinavian prince named Rurik in Novgorod, and then proceeded through the baptism of Vladimir in 988, the Mongol invasion, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the Danzig Corridor, before reaching anything that had happened in the last 100 years. The opening history lecture lasted roughly half an hour. 1 year later, in February 2025, Russia recorded the fewest monthly births on its present-day territory since the early 19th century. The early 19th century is, roughly, the lifetime of Catherine the Great. While the president of Russia was explaining the destiny of the Russian people via a 9th century Scandinavian, his country was heading towards its worst birth month since the working life of Pushkin. I want to begin there. That temporal distance from Rurik to now is a demographic floor under which Putin's Russia is operating. Russia recorded 1.222 million births in 2024, the lowest annual total since 1999. The total fertility rate stood at 1.4 and fell to 1.374 by December 2025, the lowest level since 2006 and the 10th consecutive year of decline. Demographer Alexei Raksha, who has done more than most anyone to keep this picture publicly comprehensible, estimated that the first quarter of 2025 was the worst 3-month stretch for births on this territory since the late 18th century. And the regional numbers tell an even sharper story. Smolensk fell 26.6%, Kostroma 21.6%, Karelia 19.4%. The Leningrad Oblast, the region wrapped around St. Petersburg, recorded a 2024 fertility rate of 0.89. That puts it in the demographic range of South Korea. This is a collapse with a specific shape, and the Kremlin's response to it has been one of the most revealing sequences of policy decisions any modern government has made. We're going to walk through the data, the policies, and the places where Russian children are actually being born, because increasingly those places are not in Russia. The first thing to understand is what happened to the data itself. In October 2024, Putin signed a law suspending Russia's national population census until January 1st, 2029. In May 2025, Rosstat, the federal statistics agency, dropped 4 of the 5 demographic tables it had been publishing monthly for over 2 decades. By July 2025, regional civil registry offices were blanking, deleting, or freezing the underlying birth, death, marriage, and divorce numbers. Raksha, on his Telegram channel, put it plainly. In fact, since March 2025, there have been almost no publicly available demographic statistics in Russia. The level of demographic panic within the government has reached epic proportions. Then, in February 2026, the head of the Nizhny Novgorod Institute for Demographic Development was placed under criminal investigation on fraud charges after his pro-dataless campaigns failed to raise the birth rate. The man in charge of solving the problem was arrested when the problem didn't get solved. Now, this has happened before. Stalin suppressed the 1937 census after it recorded a population 8 million below what Soviet propaganda had projected. The statisticians who ran the count were arrested because, of course, they were. In the 1970s, the Brezhnev government halted publication of death and census statistics for nearly a decade after the numbers contradicted the official story. A regime that classifies its own population data is a regime that has lost confidence in its own narrative. And when you can't see what a government is hiding from, look at what it's performing instead. Hold this picture in mind because the policy Russia has chosen to perform around this crisis deserve a slow walk. The flagship event is called Conception Day. It originated in the Ulyanovsk region in 2005. On September 12th each year, civil servants are given the day off work to procreate. Couples whose babies are born 9 months later, on June 12th, which is Russia Day, are entered into a regional prize draw. Past prizes have included refrigerators, video cameras, washing machines, and in 2007, a UAZ SUV awarded to Irina and Andrei Kartuzov for, and I quote, giving birth to a patriot. The program is still running. In April 2024, Russia introduced a new national holiday called the Day of Pregnant Women. Government employees in Moscow have, separately, received unsolicited notifications instructing them to take fertility tests. In November 2024, Putin signed a law banning what the government calls child-free propaganda. Fines for individuals run up to 400,000 rubles. A court in the Tver region soon used the new law to block several VK community groups that had promoted child-free lifestyles. One of the blocked posts featured a man proposing to a woman captured when I found out she is infertile. In September 2024, State Duma Deputy Irina Filatova went on Moscow radio to identify the threats to Russian demographic destiny. They included, in order, childlessness, non-traditional relationships, consumerism, self-development, and I am not editorializing here, cats and dogs. A sitting federal deputy blamed the country's fertility crisis on house pets. The same month, Federation Council Chair Valentina Matvienko argued that women could only be fulfilled by embracing their primary mission of being a mother, grandmother, and wife. Starting September 2024, family studies became a mandatory subject in Russian secondary schools. The Ministry of Education's published curriculum states that the goal is to cultivate pro-family value orientations, including marriage, having several children, and chastity. Russian 15-year-olds are now required to attend a state-mandated class in chastity in a country that, per Vedomosti, set a 5-year record for contraceptive sales in the first half of that same year. 19.3 billion rubles, around $177 million. In March 2025, the Ural region, population under 700,000 and shrinking for a quarter century, began paying 100,000 rubles to schoolgirls who register pregnancies. Within months, similar payments appeared in around a dozen other regions. Chelyabinsk went bigger, offering 1 million rubles for families where the mother gives birth before age 23. Sitting above all of this is the Mother Heroine Medal, revived by Putin in August 2022, awarded to women who bear and raise 10 children with a payment of 1 million rubles. It was originally issued by Joseph Stalin in July 1944 when the Soviet Union needed to repopulate after losing roughly 27 million people in the Great Patriotic War, also known as World War II. The Soviet original was given to over 400,000 women between 1944 and 1991. The Soviet birth rate declined throughout this entire period anyway. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov in summer 2024 called the demographic situation catastrophic for the future of the nation. He's right about the diagnosis. The prescription is where things fall apart. When you ask Russians why they aren't having children, the answers don't match the policy menu at all. The Higher School of Economics surveyed Russians in 2024 on why they were delaying or rejecting children. The leading answers were not Western cultural contamination or child-free propaganda. About a third cited the war directly. Another third cited difficult economic conditions, political instability, and financial pressure. The state's own pollster, the Russian Public Opinion Research Center, ran a 2025 family survey. The average desired number of children among Russian respondents had risen from 2.4 in 2005 to 3.2 in 2025, but the average expected number only rose from 1.9 to 2.4. The gap between what Russians want and what they think they can have widened from 0.5 to 0.8 children per woman. Russians want more children than they believe they will be able to have. The wanting is not the binding constraint. HSE demographer Artur Prachosyan observed that demographic modernization has lowered birth rates even in populous regions with traditionally higher birth rates such as Chechnya, Dagestan, Ingushetia, Tuva, and Altai. Mothers' age at first birth in small Russian cities has shifted from the 20 to 24 bracket into 25 to 29. Russia is undergoing what demographers call the second demographic transition, the process by which industrializing societies shift to small, late, deliberate families. The pronatalist apparatus has no leverage on this mechanism. The late Anatoly Vishnyevsky, Russia's most prominent demographer until his death in 2021, said it clearly back in 2007. Subsidies cannot impact the birth rate in any way. A low birth rate is registered not only among the poor, but also among those financially able to raise another child. He said that in 2007. The subsidies were expanded anyway. Raksha, his successor in many ways, described the result as a domino collapse. The 2020 reform shifted maternity capital toward first children. It was intended to produce an immediate visible bump. Instead, it collapsed second child births. Those collapses are now dragging down third child births, which is the indicator the regime uses to evaluate regional governors. Meanwhile, roughly 34,000 Russian villages have been deregistered, struck from official maps, in the past 3 decades. Villages continue to vanish at roughly 1 per day. 28,000 rural schools have closed since 2000. A photo essay in the Moscow Times documents a Tver Oblast village 2 hours from Lake Seliger that had 205 inhabitants in 1859 and 1 in 2010. This is a territory under the Rurik lecture, a regional governor awarding 100,000 rubles to a pregnant 18-year-old in a region whose villages have been losing their schools, post offices, and water mains for 30 years. That is the present-day texture of what Putin calls Ruski Mir. Now, I want to come back to the missing children, because they aren't missing as much as they're just being born somewhere else. In April 2026, Phuket Immigration reported that 7,596 Russian nationals had applied to extend their stay on the island. Russians were the largest foreign national presence in the province. Rental prices in the Bong Tao and Surin areas had risen more than 300%. Locals call the neighborhood Little Moscow. I have been to Bong Tao. I can assure you they are not exaggerating. And in Chalong, a school called Rosviet, which means dawn, was opened in 2018, accredited under Russian federal state educational standards. Children sit Russian state examinations via affiliation with a Moscow partner school. Their certificates are valid for university admission in Moscow and St. Petersburg. A second Russian curriculum school called Bukva focuses on advanced mathematics. A kindergarten called Skiazka, Fairy Tale, sits between rubber plantations and coconut palms adjacent to the Phuket Nature Elephant Reserve. And in northern Phuket, there is a Russian Orthodox language school. The Russian Orthodox Church has spent years pushing pronatalist campaigns at home. Now it has rebuilt itself where the immigrants are. The Argentine case is even more striking. Between February 2022 and February 2023, more than 10,000 pregnant Russian women arrived in Argentina, 5,800 of them in the 3 months before February 2023 alone. At the Sanatorio Finocchiero clinic in Buenos Aires, a quarter of the roughly 200 monthly births in December 2022 were to Russian mothers. The clinic's relation chief said, "We did not imagine it would become a phenomenon. What is happening now is an avalanche." The Argentine passport allows visa-free travel to around 175 countries, about 50 more than the Russian one. In the Palmero neighborhood of Buenos Aires, a Russian shop called Avoska sells Vareniki, Zephyr, and Lokum next to Argentine staples. The Russian language outlet Kolut described the scene with a line worth repeating. "If you meet a pregnant woman in Palermo and she is not Russian, it is time to make a wish." The conservative estimate is that around 800,000 disproportionately young, urban, educated Russians have left since 2022 and have not returned. The cohort that would otherwise be having children in St. Petersburg and Yekaterinburg and Novosibirsk is having them in Phuket and Buenos Aires. By 2024, the chair of the State Duma Committee on Family Protection, Nina Ostanina, had proposed something called a special demographic operation. The phrase is a deliberate riff on the official name of the war. The implication is that women's bodies are a battle space and that the Russian state can win this war through decrees, propaganda, prosecutions, and the rhetorical resurrection of figures from 1,000 years ago. These tools did not work in 1941 when the Soviets introduced their childlessness tax. The tax remained on the books for 50 years, outlived the country that imposed it, and produced no measurable rise in completed fertility. The next pronatalist degree will be small. The press release will mention Stolypin or Catherine or Rurik. The babies will continue to be born in Bong Tao. Russia is running out of people. The Kremlin is running out of centuries. If you want to stay ahead of stories like this, I put out a newsletter that goes deeper on exactly these kind of structural shifts on a regular basis. Link is in the description. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, now is a good time. I cover the forces that are quietly reshaping the map, and this is one of them. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.